From ego to essence, living from interiority. Before we begin today's topic, I want to thank you for being here. I recently started this channel to explore ideas that nurture our mental, spiritual, and physical growth. Along the way, I'll also share some of my own reflections and poetry. The intention is simple: to connect with like-minded people and cultivate a free-spirited, introspective community. This isn't a place to tell you what to think or do, but rather a space to ponder. Take what resonates, question what doesn't. That's how we grow. Here's how this channel will work. Every fifth recording will be a video, so you can see the person behind the voice. Those episodes will focus on concise explorations of Jungian psychology. At other times, I'll be joined by guests offering new perspectives on various topics. If there is a theme you'd like to see discussed, feel free to email me. The address is in the description. Now, let us begin. When you say I, who are you really talking about? Psychologists have asked this for decades. They call it the I complex, an attempt to understand which I we live from. Some of us move through life from superiority, some from inferiority, and a few from a deeper place called interiority. Let's start with the first two. A superiority complex, described by Alfred Adler, is an overinflated yet fragile ego. People who carry it often believe they are the most important person in the room, confident on the surface, yet terrified of being unseen. At the other end of the spectrum lies the inferiority complex, the belief that you're never enough. These people shrink themselves to feel safe, relying on others' approvals to survive. At first glance, superiority and inferiority seem like opposites, right? But they're not. They're just two sides of the same coin, the false ego. One says, I'm better than everyone. The other says, I'm worse. Both depend on comparison. Both are rooted in fear. Neither is authentic. And here's where we meet a fascinating paradox. Sometimes the superiority complex hides not behind arrogance, but behind rigidity and moralism. The person who insists on being good, who performs righteousness yet carries hidden anger or shame. They build a carefully curated image for the world, but in private, they struggle with loneliness and resentment. That person is not so different from the one who revels in self-destruction, the one who numbs pain with substances or fleeting validation, who mistakes chaos for freedom. One builds a superficial cage of order, the other a cage of chaos. But both are cages. Both are still false ego, masks covering pain that was never confronted. A healthy ego, by contrast, understands there is no arrival, no final cure, no ultimate enlightenment. Life is movement. The goal isn't perfection, it's balance. The balanced ego knows it exists to serve you, to help you navigate this world, not to rule it. So please, stop obsessing over being fully healed or fully awakened. Nobody is. Life is not a destination, it's a dance. It's not only about learning about tasting, playing, discovering what it means to be alive. You're not just here to learn, you're here to experience. And you need to balance those. Awakening unfolds naturally when we stop trying to control life and instead allow ourselves to experience it, all its facets, light and dark. That's where interiority lives. Interiority is the space where comparison ends. It's where you no longer need to prove yourself, not because you think you're better, but because you finally know who you are. As children, we all lived from interiority. We didn't compare our drawings or our laughter, we simply were. But as we grew, we learned to measure our worth by approval, grades, status, likes, followers. Over time, that innocent self was replaced by the performing self. And today, social media magnifies this. But let me be clear. Sharing your life is not the problem. It's beautiful to celebrate moments of joy, creativity, or beauty online. The problem is when our sharing becomes only curated performance, when we only show what we think will be approved of and hide what is real. When that happens, we give our worth to the crowd. We attract people who love the image, not the soul. And that kind of attention leaves us emptier than before, because deep inside we know those people don't care about us. They're just there to use us. So share what moves you. Your laughter, your messy kitchen, your victories, and your stumbles, because authenticity, not perfection, is what truly connects us. People who live from interiority don't fear being misunderstood. They know their word isn't up for negotiation. Think of Nelson Mandela, who transformed 27 years of imprisonment into a lesson in forgiveness. Or Maya Angelou, who turned pain into poetry and gave dignity to millions. Or Friedrich Nietzsche, who battled illness yet taught us the power of overcoming. And let's not forget Carl Jung, who faced the depths of his own psyche and emerged with insights that have shaped modern psychology. Different backgrounds, different colors, different eras, but the same truth. Pain is universal. What matters is how we transform it. Now I want to tell you a personal story. My grandfather was not a man of fame, but a wild yet sacred man, a free-spirited, wise soul. He was a man of integrity not because he was flawless, but because his actions, thoughts, and feelings were aligned. That is real integrity, not a performance of perfection, but a state of congruency. He helped fund schools for orphan children and for kids living with autism and other challenges, long before society understood those conditions properly, yet somehow he understood them. He helped the mayor establish food centers for the poor, volunteered his time, and when tragedy struck his community, he gave what he had. Not for validation, but because compassion was his nature. When he died, our family planned a small private funeral, but word spread, and hundreds came to pay their respects. Even years later, on the anniversary of his death, people still remember him fondly. The man who didn't fit in, but whose mind was deep, whose spirit was free, and whose heart was made of gold. But let me clarify it. I am not saying you should give everything you have away or push yourself into debt or exhaustion. That's a misunderstanding often taught by people with unhealed wounds around money or guilt. True generosity means giving from a full glass, not an empty one. Your glass doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to hold something. Your glass is your life. Perfection never carries wisdom. Wisdom comes from experience, from falling and rising. As the mystics say, the tree that reaches heaven must first have roots in hell. And hell, in its ancient sense, meant transformation, the place where all selves dissolve and new life begins. So don't give by neglecting your own needs. When you do that, you're not helping. You're simply adding another wounded soul to the world. Give through presence, through sincerity, a kind word, a genuine listening ear, a small act of ripples outward. Simple things can be profoundly powerful. My grandfather's legacy wasn't about sacrifice. It was about wholeness. He gave because he had. He gave because he was, not because he had to be. Now let us return to the idea of rebellion, because not all rebellion is the same. Empty rebellion is driven by avoidance. It looks like freedom, but feeds the wound. It's the person who numbs with drugs or distractions, or who chases one partner after another, mistaking disconnection for empowerment. Let me be clear, I am not here to promote or empower one lifestyle over another. That's not who I am. I am simply talking about motivation. When their actions aren't healing, they're just hiding pain. Grounded rebellion, however, is sacred. It's the rebellion that arises from truth, when you face your darkness and no longer live by the world's dissonant rules. It may look chaotic to others, but it is deeply purposeful. As Yang said, those who have walked through their dark nights challenge the status quo of unconsciousness. They are reclaiming their power, the authentic parts the world once tried to take. One rebellion destroys, the other transforms, and the difference shall always lie in motivation. Does it heal you at the end of the day? That's the question. Likewise, not all order is healthy. You may meet the rigid man or woman who prize themselves on moral discipline, who seem upright yet whose eyes are empty, whose laughter feels hollow, whose voice carries judgment for anyone who owns both their sensuality and their intelligence. They too are simply hurting, playing a role they once learned and believed that it is required in order to be loved. Both the rigid and the reckless are mirrors of pain. Motivation, not image, tells the truth of us all. So, I invite you to remember, you're not your labels. You're not the masks you wear to survive. You're not your past, nor anyone's perception of you. You're a living process, healing, learning, becoming. Your worth cannot be decided by applause or rejection. That right there is interiority. It is what the artist Piet Mondrian meant when he said, "The surface of things gives enjoyment, but their interiority gives life." So share your light, but also your shadow. Love bravely, give wisely, rebel purposely, and above all, live from that quiet, unshakable space within, the place where your essence, your truth, your real I has always been waiting. That is interiority. That is freedom. And that, my friend, that is you. Thank you.